Hey everyone, this week I have Tommy McNulty. The reason I wanted to talk to Tommy is that he's an expert on all things go-to-market functions. His stacked resume includes scaling 2 different organizations to over $100 million. He was the #1 AE at one point at ZocDoc back when sales meant sending faxes to doctors' offices, and he has 2 successful exits under his belt. Today he's the CRO at RO, the business banking platform for scaling companies from idea to IPO. We cover everything from how to hire your first salesperson, how to scale the organization as a founder, and how to improve your AEs and SDRs that are reporting into your organization. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. I learned a ton from Tommy, and I'm not even in sales. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and I'd love to hear. What are the biggest challenges you experience with startup sales right now as a founder? Tommy, this is going to be a really fun one because we work together.
Yeah, you better ask me easy questions.
I'm not going to. So you are our CRO at RO. What does that mean? What does a CRO do?
Yeah, so stands for Chief Revenue Officer. The CRO title evolved from, I think, what used to be VP of Sales, and you'll see VP of Sales at a lot of companies still, but revenue or driving revenue became much more of a team sport in the last 10 years, where what used to be a lot of people cold calling down lists to get deals became demand gen plus robust sales processes, sales pitches, and the acquisition of leads from multiple sources beyond just cold calling, like partnerships and things like that. So at Row, I work alongside the marketing team, where we work together, the sales team, the partnerships team, the RevOps team, and the customer success team.
Gotcha. Yeah, when we were hiring for the role of CRO, one of my favorite things on your resume that I think I read, you were like the #1 AE at ZocDoc. And what I loved about that is my grandfather was a doctor and I could never sell him on anything. So I'm curious, like what was required to achieve that and what goes into selling to doctors successfully?
I started at ZocDoc as an SDR. At the time, the SDR role didn't exist at companies, so it was kind of a novel idea. The title of the role was actually a BOA, a Business Origination Associate, which essentially, but it turned into what we know as SDRs today. The company had a goal that they wanted to shift outside sales to inside sales. I was the first person promoted from that business origination team to the account executive team. So there was like a lot of eyes on this transition of like, can this work? Mm-hmm. And I felt important because of that. And that drove me working really, really hard. So as far as like what drove me to being the #1 rep, I never looked at it like there was any other option, actually. I was just pitching through everything that I could as fast as I could. And the first 3 months in the role were really tough. They actually gave me a 3-month window to close a certain amount of customers or else I'd get demoted back down. So it was pretty stressful. And I actually didn't hit the number. Mm-hmm. But I also didn't get demoted because I was close. But what happened was I had done so much work in those first 3 months that in my 4th month, I had the best month in the history of any salesperson at the company, where I closed 27 deals where an average quota was only 12, and only 60% of people hit their quota. That happened again and again and again. And like there's no silver bullet to being really good at sales. You have to just do the thing that drives success over and over again. And I felt like I had built a process for myself on how I spoke to customers, how I found customers, how I worked with my SDR that didn't yield success all the time, but what yielded success was doing the same thing all the time and sticking to that process that I had created for myself. And by the way, at the moment, I didn't know I was doing any of this. I need to close deals. I'm afraid. I'm young. I'm working at this really cool tech company.
Works to your advantage.
Yeah, there's a level of being naive about it, which is like you just keep things really simple.
Yeah.
Like what worked, what didn't work. I'm not jaded by any past experiences.
This is tactical, but I'm curious, how did you even reach the doctors? Because when I go to see my doctor, they may like step into their office to check their email maybe once.
Yeah, I mean, we would call a lot. We had the gatekeeper problem where you're oftentimes speaking to a receptionist or an office manager. Totally normal for a doctor to be seeing patients, right? So they can't talk to you at that moment in time. But you need to make your pitch to the gatekeeper compelling enough where they put you on the doctor's calendar, or at least they forward your follow-up email to them. So we did a lot of calling. We did a lot of like battleship calling where like we would try to figure out like when was the doctor in office but not seeing patients, for example,
Oh,
just there doing paperwork.
Yeah, there has to be some level of strategy to it.
Yeah, but it was like, it wasn't, you would find your strategy via trial and error, right? So you'd like, okay, I have these 10 gastro practices that I wanted to prospect into Queens. So I'd have my SDR calling them all day long to then try to like map a configuration of what their day looked like. And then we could do things. We did a lot of faxing too. We faxed doctor's offices. The email sequencing and all that stuff didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
Basically you had Salesforce and a phone. So like us even doing mass faxes was a big deal. I remember when Yesware came out when I worked there, I could like track email opens for the first time, and it was like a game-changing thing. But yeah, it was pretty direct. And then ZocDoc had a good marketing team. They were really early in SEO. If you Googled podiatrist in Queens, you were finding ZocDoc. And a lot of the pitch that I relied on was that it wasn't so much about patients booking doctor's appointments as it was more and more customers would start to search for doctors online, and we're going to control that space on Google.
What were your information sources? Were you talking to doctors that you knew? Like, how did you get in the head of like being a doctor so that you could successfully sell to them? Because like the fax thing doesn't seem obvious to me unless I would talk to somebody there.
Yeah, I mean, if you just go into a doctor's office, you'll see that there's a fax machine making noises all day long because like referrals are coming in and referrals are going out, and there's all types of information entering via that channel, and it's like super random, but like faxing is alive and well in healthcare. So we found a service that we could fax 10,000 people at once.
Did like all the AEs just book like 6 annual visits and just visit every doctor in the local area?
I'm not going to comment on that,
Okay.
but I will say I saw a couple pulmonologists.
Okay. Gotcha. They're like, you're 22 years old. I think you're fine.
Yeah.
I saw you last week.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing here is like, it's a classic like 10,000 hour kind of thing. You need to put in the raw hours. You need to use that and actively learn during that time, make changes. You need to think critically about the audience, which makes sense. But to that point, you could probably be an AE spending 10,000 hours in the sales industry and not be as successful if you didn't do the right thing. So what do AEs spend too much time doing today? And what is your message to folks that are in sales or managing sales teams, or you're a founder hiring a salesperson? What should they spend more time on and less time on?
You are going to suck at the job no matter what you do when you start. If you have immediate success, it's luck. That's just how it goes. So you need to strip away everything that you are thinking about other than going and talking to a customer. That's why this at Row, I got a lot of pushback about everybody gets on the phone on day one. There's a reason for that, is that you can't actually train on sales academically. You can do product training, you can do objection handling, but you have to have a frame of reference in order for that information to stick. Mike Tyson has a quote, which is everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
It's the same idea. You can talk about how you sell your software in this way all you want until you have a customer that's saying to you over and over again, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
And you have to experience that, because getting past the emotional hurdle is a more significant hump than any sort of product knowledge. So now in early stage businesses, like if you're going 0 to 1, or you're a salesperson 1, or salesperson 1 through 5, whatever that is, that problem is amplified 10 times. Your process doesn't matter at that point in time. And folks get really caught up in, what will this customer think of me? Am I saying the right thing? Instead of just understanding that you are going to lose so much. You will lose so much. You might lose 99, your first 99 you might lose.
Yeah.
But the game you're playing is to get to the 1.
Right.
and you're not going to come out of the gate with the perfect pitch for the one. So whenever I talk to founders or folks that are kind of doing that like first sales hire or first deal, it's just like, don't get too caught up in how it's going to happen, because you don't know. You have to go and talk to the customer for the first time, have a pitch, get beat up, figure out why you got beat up, go and do it again, get beat up again, do it again, get beat up again.
It's almost an onboarding to becoming a salesperson.
Because like
those steps.
What winds up happening is that it's not a matter of addition but deletion.
Yeah.
So everybody comes out and they say everything that the product can do and all the value props. Unfortunately, like even the smartest people in the world can only ingest 2 to 3 pieces of information at any moment in time. So what a great salesperson does, or a great early stage salesperson does, is they start deleting things from the pitch, right? They're not adding anything, they're just deleting. And eventually you get to this really crisp way of describing your product, and hard work meets luck at some point where you find the person that really resonates with. And then you have to just do that over and over again. And then you have to you lose 99 again, get your second deal. Yeah. Lose 99 again, get your third deal. Then by the time you're doing your fourth deal, you're losing 98 out of 100.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of people look for a way around this, and there is none. And it's really gritty work. I think being the first sales rep at a startup might be the hardest job in America. Right. It's really hard.
That makes sense.
Because the level of salespersonship is not as important as the level of resilience required.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So what I'm getting here is that there's sort of a series of steps you have to take no matter what, or maybe you're not set out for it. If that stresses you out, it's just getting used to that. There's also, normalizing in your own mind, what is my batting average, and many people and baseball fans are going to check me in the comments, but like, I believe that if you can get above 300, that's Hall of Fame numbers for batting average, and sales is probably like less than 1%, probably.
But it builds over time.
Yeah.
And again, the earlier stage you are, the lower your batting average is going to be, because no one's ever heard of you. And you have to convince customers to buy your product and take a chance at the same time.
Yeah.
And you just can't understate how difficult that is. Even when you have people, and like, I've been a founder, I've done 0 to 1, like, even when you have someone that like, you're like, wow, they really love the product, we had a great pitch, there's still a level of real inertia around them worrying that they might break something in their company by buying your product.
Right.
So it all has to come together. It's resilience, getting to customers, and then eventually finding somebody who's willing to take the chance on you.
That makes sense. The message of, delete versus add resonates with me. I'm I coach rowing, and the one thing that separates me year 5 from year 1 is there's like 8 million things that go into a successful stroke. And like year 5, I'm like, we're only going to work on 2 things today. And I know they're going to get the other things wrong. Right.
Yeah.
But if they work on those 2 things, it turns out they look better at the end of the day.
It's funny. I give that advice to managers.
Yeah.
Because I'll talk to a manager and they'll say, yeah, this rep has this, and this problem. And I'm like, great. You can't talk about 6 of them.
Right.
Pick one.
Pick one.
Go do that one, then go to the next one.
Right.
Right. Because you're not gonna be able to solve 6 at once.
Yeah.
Right. So hone in on the biggest opportunity and then move on from there.
We're going to get into your blog, but one thing that I definitely wanted to ask you now is you wrote about being a historic SDR. What does that mean?
So when I had the business origination associate role, I had a manager who he's a really great manager. He was really tough, but it was, you're out of college, kind of what you need. He came to my desk one day and was like, you're going to be quoted on the amount of meetings you book. And at the time, that quota was daily. So every day was its own unique cycle. Yeah, which was, not great for my stress levels. But he said to me, he was like, I don't care about your meetings.
Fair enough.
I care about how many meetings close. So your job is to set meetings that are going to close. And he's like, no one's going to celebrate you for it. Everyone's going to celebrate people that do all of the meeting setting. And I kind of took that as like, okay, I understand. This is my manager telling me what to do. So I got to the point as an SDR where I was actually collecting credit cards ahead of sending like my outside salesperson to the place.
Wow.
So basically I would have sold the deal. I have the credit card information. I don't have access to put it anywhere except to post it.
Yeah.
I don't have access to the systems.
Yeah.
But I would take a picture of it, send it to the rep, like, hey, this deal's done. Go in and say hello. Right?
Yeah.
And when I talk about being a historic SDR, it's that. The goal of the SDR is to generate business. It's not to generate meetings. It's to generate business. Meetings are an input to business. So that's what I mean. And I will always promote the SDR that's driving more closed business before I promote the one that's winning in meetings.
That's interesting. So there's so much in there. So like, I imagine a lot of that is incentives. How do you set it up in the right way to like encourage your SDRs to chase the right output?
There's this whole school of thought like, oh, control what you can control, right? I'm paid on revenue, right? The macroeconomic times influence what you make on revenue. I can't control that,
right?
But it's still important, and I understand that it's important. And when you set up the incentive structure, it's kind of as simple as what that manager did with me, which is somebody of influence, that's senior, telling them, listen, your compensation is based on meeting set, right? That is the simplest way to do compensation. That being said, that's not your job. Right. Your job is to find meetings that are going to close. And if you want to be a lifelong SDR, keep setting meetings, but this is not the place for you. I'm looking for SDRs that want to be AEs in 6, 9, 12 months, and you're fighting with me to be an AE. That's what I want.
Right.
Right. And I think it's a matter of just setting that expectation. I don't want to hire career SDRs. It's not, I actually think it's a red flag. Like you should want to be in a closing role as quickly as possible.
Yeah, they want development out of it as well.
Yeah. So that's what it comes down to.
You mentioned one other piece in your response about, when founders hire, your first salesperson. You've been in that position quite a bit actually on your resume of being the first hire at several companies. Like for first-time founders that have never gone through this before, they've maybe raised some money, they know that they need to hire a salesperson. What advice do you have for them to avoid mistakes?
Take no advice. So I'm going to caveat this.
Fair enough.
And I'm going to get
Yeah.
So every company is different. Every human is different. Everybody has a series of experiences that leads them to where they are in this moment. When you're doing early stage sales, it's a game of resilience, not a game of sales. So you have to hire somebody who is really obstacle intolerant first. As a founder, you also can't expect this person to be the silver bullet that fixes your problems. If you think you have selling problems or pitch problems or value proposition problems, you need to solve those before you bring in the salesperson.
So are you saying founder should be the expert on sales first, and then it's more of a delegation task?
I don't think a founder needs to be the expert on sales. I think there just has to be a kernel of something that worked at least once or twice.
Right.
And it has to have worked with a non-friends or family member, a non-investor contact, a true random customer.
Right.
That has to have happened first. One of the roles I took that hadn't happened, and I was there to sort of go and do the very first deal. And we got it done, but it was a lot of me trying to figure out what was in the founder's head. And that was hard. So things will not be built out. Things will be messy. But you want to be able to, this first salesperson, to say, start selling this way, and then figure out how it's going to work for you.
Right.
There's a lot of things out there of hire an SDR, hire an AE, hire someone with this background, hire someone with that background. It doesn't matter. Right. You need to find someone with the right intrinsics who are motivated by the task at hand. And then just remember, this is not your sales team. This is like the person that's helping you get your first 100 customers.
That makes sense.
And you don't have to be cute with like compensation and things like that. Just like make them a part of the team. Don't put a whole lot of risk on their head. Make sure they have good equity upside. Be supportive. Understand that the role is really hard. Make sure that engineering and product are listening to the feedback that's coming from the front line. And then make sure that you have somebody who understands that like you are going through first, right? So like when you go through first, you take all the bullets.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a very different type of person than you'd hire later.
Is this are you thinking this is like a middle of their career, like reaching that they're looking for the resume moment, or do you want a seasoned person? Like,
it's dirty work.
yeah.
It's dirty work. So if it's a seasoned person, you have to really believe that they're ready for the dirty work. It can work. Someone with no experience can also work.
Right.
Like, oddly enough, that's never sold a thing in their life.
Ever been in sales? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no bad habits with that person. The risks is that they need to learn how to do sales. The other person, they know how to do sales, but the risks are like, oh my God, like I don't have these 17 tools. I don't have resources. I don't have an AM. I don't have an SDR. I don't have a script. And the characteristics of the person are far more important than the experience that they have.
Are there things that are red flags in your book? Like founders interviewing probably a dozen and they're like, this characteristic, probably we don't want to go with this person.
It's not like red flags as much as it's caveats.
Yeah.
So it's like if you're hiring somebody early in their career with less experience, the caveat is you believe in your heart of hearts they can become an expert communicator on your product. Right. And what you're actually searching for is a high level of grit and motivation. If you're hiring someone with more experience, let's say 5-7 years of an account executive experience, the question you have to ask yourself is, are they going to be able to live outside the system? Right now, if they're working in a big SaaS company or wherever they might be, they're living inside of a system with a defined set of rules and work that they have to do.
Right.
Can they come into a place with a high level of ambiguity? That's your caveat. If you're going further and you're talking to a VP of sales or a CRO or someone that looks like amazing on paper, just remember that the job that they're doing right now is incredibly different than the job you're asking them to do.
How
right?
so?
Think about me, for example, right? We have a team of, I think, 37 people on go-to-market. If I need help with a Salesforce report, I have a RevOps person. If we need help with onboarding a customer, we have a CS person. None of that exists at day one. Right? Yeah. So you are the all-seeing entity, right? For the customer experience. So those people can work because there are people that get like re-motivated by that type of work. I'm one of them, but you have to check for that. Yeah. And so have folks understand like, hey, your job is to do day one selling. It's hand-to-hand combat.
Because I imagine you just have to be laser clear in an interview. And sometimes people will tell you yeah, that sounds good. And then you mishire. Is there anything you can do to avoid that?
I mean, you have to check references.
Yeah.
I mean, this because I enforce it on the team, but no matter what the experience level is, I want to prove that you can produce references, number one. Number two is, I want to speak to references. And people might say, well, have you ever talked to a reference that gives you a bad reference? That's not the point of a reference check. The point of a reference check is to ask very specific questions. If you go into a reference check and you say, what do you think about this person? They're going to say they're great. If you go into a reference check and you say, hey, if I fired this person in 3 months, what would be the reason? You'll get an accurate understanding of what that person's deficiencies are.
The burden is on you to get the most out of it.
The burden's on you to collect data, right? And
they're not going to give you insights just because you're talking to them.
Exactly. And so you have to check references is first and foremost. Second, I think, is you have to clearly define the role for somebody. And it's important if you're talking to that VP of sales person who's going to come and join your day one startup, you have to be very clear. Your job is to call 100 customers a day, pound the pavement, whatever the tasks are. Because what you don't want to have happen is someone who gets caught up in strategy when you sort of, to our other part of the conversation, need to just go out and talk to customers.
Right.
And then for earlier stage people or early career people, you have to set the expectation, hey, I'm taking a risk on you, but you need to grow quickly. Yeah. So I think that's how you sniff it out. But I think in your interviews, you have to test for intrinsic characteristics, right? You have to look for grit. You have to look for coachability. You have to look for communication skills. In startups in particular, You need high agency. So someone that's willing to like really go and do things on their own. And then last but not least, might be controversial. You need incredibly low civility. So, you know, the person who is really buttoned up and like gonna like take every precaution and measure necessary is actually not gonna work.
Yeah. It's all about upside.
This was feedback I got in one of the teams I was running, which, you know, there was a mentor of mine came in, you know, we were talking and he like looked at the team and he was like, these people are too civil.
Gotcha.
Right. You need more intensity.
Right.
And you need people that are just going to focus on getting the thing done. And like, when I say civility, I don't mean like, go be an asshole.
Right.
I mean, like, you're just not that focused on anything other than getting the thing done that you need to get done.
I don't remember the specific like video, you know, interview, but at some point I remember watching a clip from Neil deGrasse Tyson where he's explaining how many things at one time are trying to destroy planet Earth, like from gravitational pulls to temperature checks, asteroids, just so many things compounding. And it reminds me of that point because, you know, there's so many things happening in a market where you're a startup, you know, just from pure observation and working at one, where competition, you know, the markets in general, we've been through a couple like ups and downs in terms of an economy. But just reminding yourself that, you know, your company may not exist, or just treating it as such, treat it as you may not exist 3 months from now. How should you respond to that?
Yeah, there's a level of urgency that exists in startups, and, you know, whether or not we like to talk about it, there's a clock, like there's an end date.
Yeah.
Right. It's like your runway is your end date. The more you can internalize that, the better. That this isn't a thing that's going to exist forever. You're not going and working at Coca-Cola.
Right.
You're going and working on something that hasn't yet proven itself, and it either one of two things need to happen. The company either needs to achieve profitability before you run out of money, or the company has to be fundable again before you run out of money. Now, that's the job of the founder to communicate like the strategy to the team. But like you can't spend a whole lot of time in analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
Right. No one ever got a great exit multiple on their internal processes.
I gotcha. That makes sense. So, you know, you were an early sales hire at many, you know, at a few companies here in New York. And one of the companies that's really interesting is Fundera. You've been a part of a process where a company grows really fast and then it becomes a part of an M&A, you know, a piece of M&A activity. Walk me through what the experiences are from a sales leader or individual in sales, like going through that process, the before, the during, the after, and how does it impact, you know, the roles you take on in the future and how you think about sales overall?
There's not so much of a before. The decision to, you know, shop your company or to think about an acquisition sits solely with the CEO. And they're going to go and run that process first. Luckily, the situation we had was our CEO was very open, transparent. He looked at the leadership team as basically everybody as a founder of the business. So there was never, he was never doing that without us knowing. So I knew it was happening. That person will go through a process. They'll get to hopefully a term sheet for a deal, which is basically the opening gambit. So the term sheet gets signed. And then what happens is like, can this deal close? Term sheets mean nothing. So we go into diligence and you'll get somewhere between 1 and 10,000 different document requests. And that's not an exaggeration. A data room will open and over the course of 2 weeks, requests will just continue to populate from various executives at the company buying your company. Sales tends to get a lot of them, right?
Really?
Yeah, because again, in the situation I was in, the acquiring company was going to bolt on a new vertical. So the revenue function was really important. Like, does it work? Is it profitable? Is it repeatable? I was really proud of how they looked at our team.
Yeah.
Was that we could return 80%. We could return. we could return 80% contribution margin per person. So if we were paying somebody $100,000, we can have them make $500,000 for the company in a year.
Right.
Our marketing paybacks were under 6 months. We had a really defined, robust way where we can take somebody out of college, promote them through an SDR program into an AE program. And it was a machine. And what they were buying, at least part of what they were buying, wasn't so much like a sales team as it was as a machine that they can plug in to their business.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot about what's important. Like when the chickens come home to roost, right? And all the emotion of fundraising is gone and the day-to-day is gone. And there's somebody that's making a decision to go and buy the stock of your company. When they evaluate your revenue function, they're not going to evaluate anything other than how efficient is it and can I plug it in
Today.
Can I plug it in, right? Like, is it, are the parts assembled and is it just a plug, right? Or do the parts still need to be assembled? Are there renegade reps? Is there concentration risk? Is it unprofitable? We had a good leadership team, across marketing and finance and the partnerships team that kind of all understood this the whole time. Right. So when the time came, we were able to get, a high 9-figure deal done in 3 months. You don't really know what's important until you're asked.
Yeah.
Finally, right?
Yeah.
And you start to see like new hire onboarding is actually an important thing because this company is thinking about the next 1,000 reps.
Right.
Stuff like that.
That makes sense. And then after that experience, you went on to go find your own company or launch your own company rather. And Ro, we do offer banking services to startups. And as a founder, like for founders who may be watching this, whose company has decided are ICP or VC-backed startups, what's the key to selling to them? And how did your experience inform that?
I think there's a myth that founders care about anything else other than acquiring customers for themselves.
Yeah.
I did a couple of groups. I did like On Deck and a few like fellowships when I was starting my company, and I would see like Slack channels open. I'm like, oh, do you recommend like Rippling over Gusto, or do you recommend like Deal over this, or Carta over Pulley? And it's just like, who the cares?
Yeah.
Like you need to work. You need to trust that these products are going to work so well, and you can onboard so quickly that you never have to look at it again. Right? That's how I felt about my payroll, my bank account, my credit card, my cap table management software, my email client, my web hosting service, things that really don't influence your ability to go win customers. They just influence the ability for your company to keep functioning.
Yeah.
And you have to like if I were to start a company again, I would give myself 1 day only to set up all those things.
Right.
And that would be it. Right. So when you sell to startups, you have to know that they need to be able to use your product with as little friction as possible. And the best version of usage is non-usage.
Right.
Because the thing that you've given them is doing the work for them so that they can go and do the work that is the hard shit that we just talked about, like going getting your first 100 customers that might take 100 phone calls or 100 meetings just to get one. Right.
That makes sense.
So that's when you have to understand that headspace. The nice thing about startups now here's the plus side. Because of that, they make decisions really fast.
Right. There's not months-long sales.
There's no buying cycles. You need it or you don't need it. Right. Cash is constrained, right? There is a need. So if you're selling to a startup, you need to be able to onboard your customer to live functionality in 90 minutes or less.
Got it. That makes sense. Shifting gears a little bit, and this is a little awkward because I'm in marketing, so I'm going to put my sound-killing headphones on. What do you hate about things that marketers do?
There was a boom of new marketing initiatives and strategies, circa 2015, 2016, when, SaaS first came to market. Landing pages looked different. Demand gen became a thing. Email marketing became a thing. And I feel like somebody that crowns themselves a good marketer is doing nothing but copying a default now. And like, go and look at all companies. Like, landing pages look the same. The outreach sequences look the same. And buyers are smart now. Like, I know very well if I'm in an outreach sequence, right? Or if I'm talking to a conversational UI and not a person. And I think marketing needs to get back to creative pattern disruptions. Yeah. What is the thing?
What do you mean by that?
What is the thing you're going to do that's going to stop somebody from scrolling through?
Bum stoppers. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what is that thing? And maybe it's weird, and maybe it's, off-putting or provocative, or I don't, I'm not sure, but I would like to see more people taking more chances,
More risk.
with their brand, missing more, because there's only so many. Like, I will go back to my desk and I will have 10 emails I've gotten today selling sales software. I'll have 5 LinkedIn messages selling sales software, and the default is just to not look.
Yeah.
Right. So I would like to see more creativity and more new things, right? Where I think we're due for a refresh.
Makes sense. Bit of a reset.
Yeah.
What are you still learning as a CRO?
Context switching can be really difficult. So, my day could look like going from supporting on an enterprise deal to building a Salesforce workflow, to approving marketing copy, in a 90-minute span. And that's hard for me. It's still a muscle I'm building to be able to, like, quickly switch context. And I'm something I'm working on.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I mentioned we'll get into your blog. It's really good, and we'll link it down in the
You're just saying that because we're on the same team?
Nope, it is really good. I read it before we actually hired you, and I was like, this is the right guy based on this. So I'm going to do a bit of a rapid fire. There were a couple notes that I wrote down. I wanted to get clarification on a few things. So a couple things you write are the sales to engineering connection. There's different types of feedback. Walk me through those different types of feedback. I think you mentioned fire drill, recency, no evidence.
Yeah.
Why are they relevant to product folks?
Yeah. So, I'm going to, like, take a contrarian take here to all my fellow salespeople out there and say salespeople suck at giving product feedback.
Why?
Product feedback and taking a series of super expensive resources to go and do a thing is not like a easy two-way door that you can step out of. It could be a millions of dollars endeavor. And in order for us to make those leaps and make those decisions, there should be a pattern of the problem or a pattern of the opportunity. So what happens with sales teams giving product teams feedback, first, like, it's called, like, the fire drill. You have one customer that has one problem or has one issue, and then it becomes like, we're losing all of our business because of this one thing. Maybe, but I would want to see it a couple of times before we would go and make those decisions. That's first. Second is recency. Like, oh, I just got off this one call, right? And this one thing happened to work, right? And you might be thinking in your head, people that you hear at Row that talk that way, right? And it may have just worked once, but if we come back to the earlier part of the conversation, right? Like, that can it work 12 times out of 100, right? That's recency. And then no evidence is just what it says. It's emotional, it's anecdotal, there's no real feedback to it. And the thing that I think we as salespeople have to remember is that there's a receiving end to this, right? That is trying to parse through the thing you're trying to say, convert it into a product, and then or a product idea, and then convert that idea into a series of tasks and resources and people over a period of time.
Right.
And being a founder gave me a lot more empathy for this process, actually. So, which is why, like, I think people at Row are like, oh, you don't engage with the product team that much. I'm like, no, I'm just like, picking our spots,
That makes
right?
sense.
On things that are like actually important and they're going to move the needle versus trying to just dilute the workflow with like small tasks.
That makes sense. I'm thinking of like an AE who, they may have gotten on a customer call and they're like, no, but I really need this feature. I understand what you're saying, Tommy, but I really need this one.
Yeah.
Make the case to them why it's a better approach for their, incentives, ultimately closing customers, winning deals, to take this more long-term approach to getting better at engaging with product.
Yeah. You're not helping if you're just dropping every little thing onto somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's just what it comes down to. Once you understand that there are a finite amount of resources doing a finite amount of things in a capital constrained environment, and you can only pick 1 to 3 things at any moment in time, right? Is your thing one of the 3 things? Maybe it is, by the way, right? Like, there are moments where it's like we stumble into something where, okay, like this is actually a real problem or a real opportunity and we should talk about it. Mm-hmm. But you're in the business of building a company, not in the business of winning each individual deal. Now, you do need to win deals as a salesperson, but that understanding that this feature you're requesting is 5 people's time for a month means that those 5 people can't do other things.
That makes sense.
So is the thing you're requesting more important than those other things or
Those
not?
other things, especially if like you're looking at the deal and it's like only going to give you like $500. It's like,
Yeah, and then like I get that it can be frustrating. I do. Like, I've been a seller. I've been the person requesting the things. But you have to take an approach of like what is best for the business, and is there a feature being built that's going to go help you win 50 deals?
yeah,
And is that feature more important than this one?
got it. Okay, a couple more. The factory floor analogy with sales.
I'll caveat this. This is really more for like SMB style sales. So let's call it like ACVs under 10K, where your sales process is about selling and communicating to customers, but it should resemble manufacturing in that you have to do a high volume of deals generally. So the process by which you take a customer from start to finish is as important as how you talk about your product. If we thought about intent as raw material and we thought about a closed deal as the produced product, like your job as a sales leader of a team that sells smaller deals is to build something closer to a factory than an art studio. Right. Because you need to pump a lot of volume through. And in a business that might have multiple steps between, let's say, a demo and a closed deal, the management of those steps, or the mismanagement of those steps, is actually where the funnel will unravel itself. So that is, the operations are as important as the sales.
That makes sense.
In a model like that.
We talked a little bit about selling to founders. Now, how do SaaS companies move up market? What's the key to selling to enterprise customers?
You need to be prepared to do a year-long consulting arrangement.
Gotcha.
So if SMB or smaller deals is we're taking intent or manufacturing a closed won deal through that intent, a machine process that just runs over and over again. Enterprise sales is a lot more of an art form, where you are committing to driving to a yes over 12 months potentially. And over those 12 months, you might have 50 meetings, and you might do a product roadmap, and you might do an implementation plan, and you might have to have 7 or 8 or 9 people in your company multi-thread across that company. And just the way I said before, that being a VP of sales at a late stage company and being a day one hire couldn't be more different, doing enterprise and doing SMB couldn't be more different.
Right.
And if you want to move up market, you just need to recognize that. Where what happens a lot, and it's funny, I just talked to a founder yesterday who's kind of going through this, like you try to put the big customer, if you're selling small customers and go big, you try to put the big customer through the small customer process, and they're like, what are you doing? They're like, I'm obviously not making a decision right now, right? Like, you know how this works, right? Right.
Exactly.
And you kind of look silly when you try to do that. So it's understanding your buyer personas, understanding how they get to yes. But then really it's like you're signing up for a year-long consulting arrangement.
That makes sense.
That's what you're doing.
Then finally, the art of unslamming the door.
I get a lot of cold calls. I've made a lot of cold calls. I've managed people that have made a lot of cold calls. Part of the job is you get hung up on.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. There's nothing you can do to change that. But there are small nuances to just humanizing yourself a little bit when you get on with somebody that makes the person on the receiving end feel a little bit bad about hanging up on you.
Right.
And those come in the forms of like being genuine, being quick and to the point.
It's not like things like, I got a wife and kids, please don't hold up or like hang up on me. It's like,
Yeah, no. It's not like, don't ruin my life, please. It's more of, can you get to your point really quickly?
yeah.
Ask a question, keep them talking. And it's kind of as simple as that. Like, you'll get a cold call and someone will say, yeah, like we do blah, 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 blah. Right? And I can't ingest that as the
Right.
person on the receiving end. So my default is to hang up. You basically have to make someone's default not hang up.
You're like already regretting answering the phone.
You have to have a value proposition. I call it a relevancy statement. Like, what is the statement you're going to make that makes this phone call relevant to this person?
Makes sense.
And then you have to turn it into a
Do you have an example?
like your relevancy statement would be like, let's say you were calling an inbound customer. Hey, I saw that you came to our website and put in some information. My name is Tommy. I'm calling from Row. I'm here to tell you more about that. That's your relevancy statement of why you made that phone call. Hey, I saw that you just made this business acquisition in this food technology space. We actually exclusively service businesses in your category that helps with procurement. Right? So you have a reason for the relevance of your call other than I'm just calling to sell you my stuff.
Okay. Well, we have some calls to go make for the rest of our afternoon, but I appreciate you taking time out.
Yeah. Thank you, Justin.